9. A Man in Grey. Mairynne returned to the castle around midday, stating to those of us still gathered in the House of Healing that she'd carry news of our situation to the advisory council on my behalf. I thanked her with a tight hug and returned to my guard's bedside. Late that afternoon, Thalaja groaned. I turned and leaned over him as he opened his eyes. Confusion, then worry darkened his gaze as he searched my face. "Shh," I said. "All is well. You'll be fine, and I have the totem we'll need to find the Sinti." The small figurine had a loop attached, and I had hung it beside the stones at my neck. I reached up and pulled the necklace from my bodice to show him. When he seemed to relax, I added, "Right now is your time to rest and recover." He scanned his battered body and tested how it moved, issuing a grunt here and there, but he huffed loudly when he looked under the covers at his casted leg. In the days that followed, Corwine and Thalaja healed together, and I never left the House of Healing. On the 6th day after meeting Zephrine, a messenger came with a package wrapped in brown paper and a rough rope securing it with a tight little knot. The healer offered me a knife to cut away the ties, and we examined the little golems. They looked so much like each of us, it was shocking. We explained the situation to Thalaja and Corwine, and how these would taste anything we wished to consume. Supposedly, they'd turn solid black if the food was of danger to our bodies or health. The spellcaster had keyed the golems to our unique person, so if something would be poisonous to one, but not the other, the golems would know. Each came in a little box with a silver latch that we would carry securely within a pocket, though walking about with an animated miniature of myself gave me significant pause. Zephrine also delivered a potion of which Corwine was to take 3 drops every morning as a measure to ward off his tremors. It seemed to work, and he improved more rapidly from the day he began his dosing. I arranged for Mother Feathergala to have rooms prepared for Thalaja at the castle, and in another couple of days, we all returned to Stormskeep proper. Senti Summergala came daily to check on Thalaja and Corwine, but we had a plan. Rest, recover, and have our food tasted by the miniature versions of ourselves. I went to Thalaja each morning, and we walked to Nadia's cottage at the beginning, middle, and ending of each day, visiting and taking our meals with Nadia and her partner. Corwine healed quickly as the days passed. Nadia taught me to prepare food from her garden, and as such, when we ate there, we had to use our golems less than if we were to dine elsewhere. I attended to her cooking lessons eagerly, under the assumption that I would have need of the skills before long. Beyond preparing our own meals, we spent some time testing our tiny replicas. The bright orange lily flowers that Nadia tended, adding beauty to her garden, were poisonous when consumed. We brewed some of those and fed the resulting broth to the golems. They each turned a putrid gray, then blackened and fell over with a tiny choking sound. Then, like a dead plant coming back to life with a good soaking, they stood up before our eyes. Though it was a morbid game, we all laughed as the 4 tiny animated figurines went rigid, fell, and bloomed again. They were like new toys, and we behaved as younglings would and repeated the process several times, chuckling with amusement when their health returned. Thalaja, ill-accustomed to being so limited physically, grew increasingly frustrated with the rigid boot and restrictions imposed by Senti Summergall. He maintained a grateful demeanor while a guest at my aunt's table, but on our walks, he repeatedly grumbled and complained. Rorine and another guard, Galen, the one I'd seen him spar with in the yards, visited. It refreshed his mood slightly that he had the chance to learn about Stormskeep's protection and offer strategy and advice. When, after long weeks, he could walk without my assistance or leaning onto a cane, the healer removed the cast. Encouraging him to rest once he no longer wore the brace was near impossible, but he still attended meals on occasion at the cottage and kept his golem tucked in the breast pocket of his tunic at all times. One evening, the Lhasa had gone beyond Arashi's gates and returned with a hare. He and Corwine worked together to skin and clean it for the pot, and Nadia and I prepared it for the evening meal. We sat down to eat, each holding a steaming bowl of the well-herbed meaty stew with root vegetables from the cottage garden. When we'd each sated our appetites, I leaned back in my chair with a goblet of sweet wine in hand. Looking at the satisfied company, I felt comfortable enough to broach the subject. The Lhasa is gaining strength by the day. He's almost back to his full training schedule. I've spoken with Mairynne about the party she's gathered to search for father, and they should be preparing to leave the next time Selene is at her fullest in the sky. I took a drink, then added, I will be traveling with them. Corwine dropped his goblet on the table and sat forward.
Mairynne, that journey is a tough fate for anyone. I fear you're not suited for it.
Sitting straighter, I said, I am. My near-uncle persisted.
Kogo, I mean no disrespect, but we do not know what this journey entails. Your parents sheltered you within the castle for your entire life, and you are now the Nantai empress, heaven's sovereign. The people of all the castes look to you and your council for guidance and decisiveness.
Corwine was my subject. I could silence any objection and simply declare that this would come to pass. After all, it would. Knowing all this, and that the right was mine, left me with a temptation that seemed childish, so I stifled any comment. I'd felt this way since the day my father vanished. Each time I thought of him, the stone about my neck burned. Ever since the potion woman, Zafrine, told me that the road before me stretched for lengths untold, I had never been more certain of my path. Corwine, you misplace your worry. The duties of the Nantai ruler are better handled by someone more mature than me. I paused, looking toward my aunt. I've learned a great deal from Nadia during this recovery. The Lhasa will be at my side, along with other soldiers, so I will be safe. When I return, it will be with my father, I am certain. He bowed his graying head.
Have you considered that Tenyo Azarine may not still live? It is so unlike him to be absent from his duties. His love for Nantai and her people was so great that he'd have sooner perished than remain away.
A substantial weight sank upon Corwine as he said these words, and it was clear that they tasted sour on his tongue. Nadia reached across the table, took his hand, and turned to me. All that he says makes sense, Mairynne. That more than 4 moons have passed and your father hasn't appeared lead me to believe he will not return. I grasped the stones about my neck. The one that rested in the center burned my palm, reassuring me in my conviction. The thought has occurred to me many times. In truth, the counselors have voiced the same logic and reasoning to me on several occasions. Yet I still sense his life force still walking this land. I believe with everything in my soul that he lives. And this, holding court and deciding small grievances of a farmer here or a hunter there, or listening to the advice of my father's council on the matter of our next festival, is not my place. The politics and minutiae are already wearing on me. The Lhasa sat silently at my side. I continued. My road travels to other places. Where, I don't know just yet, but on the morrow, I will go to the Triad and write the decree. A long silence stretched between the 4 of us at the table. At last, I turned to my aunt. You have cared for me more than anyone since my mother's death and father's disappearance. You have been wise as my first advisor and taught me what I most needed. You've shown me the same love as my mother, and you offer me only wise advice in the way of ruling the people. I took a deep breath. I will leave the temporary leadership of the Nantai to you. You will have to visit the High Cloud Court to take the oaths in the same manner I did. But you will have the golem. Corwin will be at your side. Solarine will assuredly become your first advisor. And I will send a letter to Sanseri to help you through the proceedings. I touched the metal cuff I still wore beneath my sleeve on the upper part of my right arm. The time had arrived for us to go, and thankfully, I received no argument then and there from Thalaja. It was unlikely that I had fully convinced Nadia or Corwine my intentions were the best for all involved. For my part, worry also gathered in my heart that the decision might be wrong. But of the options, it felt the most right. I hugged Nadia with everything I had and left her standing in the doorway with Corwine. Thalaja walked me back to the castle itself across the lush grasses, and I looked up at Selen's countenance face as we went. We were about halfway through the return when he looked at me, a glint in his eye. "How do you feel about a longer walk tonight?" "Sure," I agreed suddenly, thinking that my rooms would be stifling. I raised my skirts and followed Thalaja down the stone steps. Selen shone brightly as she approached her fullness. That it seemed so close made my heart leap. But how long did we have remaining? 4? Maybe 5 days? At the base of the castle's steep walls, we strolled beside the river. Thalaja broke the silence after several minutes. "Since I've been back, and you've had so many attempts on the lives of your family members, I am beginning to see the logic in you leaving." I stopped, grabbed the crook of his arm, and turned him to face me. "Are you actually saying you want me to go?" "No," he scoffed. "I'd much prefer it if I could take you somewhere safe and leave you there until I return." I snorted. A horrible sound, but one showing exactly what I thought of his overprotective sentiment. With a chuckle, he continued, "I didn't think you'd agree with the approach." "So, stubborn though you are, you're learning," I teased. But in the deepest part of me, I welcomed his change of heart, even if it remained reluctant. "Mairynne." "Wait, no Kogo?" I needled him some more. He raised a perfectly slanted brow and asked, "Do you wish for me to call you that?" We shared a laugh. This man knew me almost as well as anyone, and of course I didn't relish the thought of him or anyone else calling me Kogo. We resumed walking, but his demeanor turned more serious with each step. "I think it's best if we limit the number of people who know you are going. Do you have to approach the entire triad in order to write your decree?" My brows drew together as I asked, "It's customary for the 3 Halogalas to witness the writings of the emperor or empress. Do you have cause to suspect them in something?" He shook his head. "Nothing specific. I'm just being conscientious. Is it possible to only have one? Is there one you are closer to than the others?" "If I had to choose, I'd pick Tasmin, the priestess of Selen. If you feel strongly about that, I'll only go to her tomorrow." "I do. I think it's a wise idea." "What about the council? And my sisters? I'll need to share with them my intentions so they can help make the arrangements for Nadia's ascension." "I don't think you should tell them your plans. They would know soon enough after you're gone." He hesitated, then went on. "Tell me, have you given the little people to your sisters?" "Do you mean the golems?" I smiled. The animation of the little clay-based replica of him bothered him more than he obviously wanted to admit. "Yes, the golems." He sneered as he spoke the word, as if it tasted sour on his tongue. "Did you give them to Kareen and Yasmin?" "I haven't." My brows grew heavy at this. I'm not sure what keeps me from giving them their protection. Maybe it's that I'll have to explain the entire situation. Or it could be that the potion woman warned me from giving out the little tasters. I don't believe that either of my sisters had a hand in Corwine's fate, but some weird intuition tells me not to. As I said this, the cold stone about my neck grew colder. Thalaja inhaled and huffed. "I worry that your intuition may be better than you know, and I'm not certain I can fathom what that means for you, for them, or for this journey we're about to take." "And I think I worry that something further might happen to Nadia." He turned to me. At what point we'd stopped, I couldn't say, But we stood under the moonlight next to the rushing water, and he looked at me darkly.
"If you will allow it, I will assign Rorine and Galen to guard your aunt and her partner."
He looked away, then back to me with a slight smile. My heart expanded with gratitude, but something else niggled inside. "What are you not saying, Thalaja?"
"I'd need to share the situation, and your plans, with my guards to help them be better prepared."
I broke away and trod a path back and forth at the water's edge. With one hand wrapped around my waist, my free hand worried at my bottom lip as I considered the possibility of sharing this information with people I barely knew, in the place of people I'd spent my entire life around. Why did I feel more comfortable with the former rather than the latter? I couldn't pinpoint it, but when I looked up at my first guard, all I said was, "Make it happen." He nodded.
"One more thing."
I went back to him and looked up into his dark eyes. He glanced up at the moon, then resumed eye contact.
"Selene will show her full body in the sky on the third night hence. I will come for you that morning in the early hours before dawn. Be prepared to meet me and leave before first light."
The prominent characteristic of the moon goddess's temple was the sizable quarter-moon-shaped cutout in the ceiling, designed for watching the goddess pass through the night skies. I found Tasmin, priestess of Selene, there, and pulled her from gathering tithes people had placed upon the goddess's altar. "Tasmin, I have need of you within the grand sanctuary." I latched onto her hand and pulled her forward.
"Kogo, with due respect, what is this regarding? I have duties I must attend to before nightfall and the service this evening."
"I need you to bear witness." Upon her hand, the moon-shaped ring gleamed, with the sigil of the goddess.
"Have you gathered Edamine and Arline as well?"
"Your Holiness." I stopped and turned to face her nose to nose. "I won't be bringing them into this matter. While that is customary, it is not a requirement. The annals only require one Hollow to witness an official decree. I'd like to keep this one as quiet as possible for now. Can I trust you with this?" Her eyes widened, and when she gave a jerky nod, I pulled her forward. I stopped outside the large open doors and looked around for others before searching the sanctuary inside. When I'd satisfied myself that no others were present, I went to the dais that held the most current of the annals. I picked up the feathered quill and dipped it into the ink. Weighing my words, I penned the date, then wrote, "I, Kogo Mairynne Evangale, decree that upon my realized absence from the city of Arashi and Storm's Keep Castle, my aunt and sister to the murdered Kogo Mairynne Evangale shall ascend to the Serpentine Throne. In doing so, she shall recite Morwine's oath, declaring that the throne shall return to its previous owner, should that owner return." I signed the decree and handed the quill to Tasmin. The priestess read my words, then lifted her eyes to meet mine.
"I cannot sign this, Kogo."
"Your holy vows bind you to this duty." I pushed the quill closer. Tasmin took it and signed. I retrieved the black wax candle from the altar and dripped wax next to her name. She stared at the moon ring on her right hand for a long minute, until I reached forward and took her by the wrist. She didn't resist, but didn't actively aid in sealing the decree either. After she'd completed the imprint, I let out a sigh, just as the scuffling sound of boots alerted us to someone's approach. We both looked up, and I closed the book as my new attendant, Doreen, appeared in the door. She panted, but said between breaths,
"Oh, good. I found you, Kogo Mairynne."
She stopped and gulped, then added,
"Oh, mine Evangale and Idaline Feathergala sent me in search of you."
That seemed an odd combination, but I ignored the inclusion of the counselor Evangale as I moved toward my newest attendant. "What would put Mother Feathergala in mind to send you in such a rush for?" Doreen, having recovered her breath some, looked at her shoes and wrung her hands.
"She just said to bring you to the council chambers quickly."
I pressed my lips into a tight line. "Tasmin, Will you find Edamine and Arline and meet us there?" The priestess curtsied.
"Right away, Kogo."
Without further conversation, I exited the sanctuary. Once outside and connected to the atmosphere, I called the wind to speed my journey. The bridge emptied on the same level of the keep as the library and my chambers. I quickly climbed the steps to the next level and hurried into the council chambers where the Serpentine Throne awaited. Inside, Omine stood beside a guard who held a sword on someone in gray, nondescript clothing, sitting upon his knees and facing the throne. I couldn't see his face from where I stood. Mother Feathergala paced along the other side of the throne, and when she noticed me, she rushed forward. "Mairynne, we found him trying to enter your rooms, and he carried a file in his hand."
A file? My rooms?
I looked beyond the woman I'd known all my life to the gray form on the floor and moved. I couldn't feel my legs and could no longer hear the Sunday falls for the blood rushing in my ears. "Do you have the file?" I asked, to no one, or to anyone. I didn't care which. Mother Feathergala scurried behind me. "Evangale does." Suspecting, or mayhap fearing what I would see, I extended a hand. My counselor placed a corked glass phial on my open palm. When I examined the fluted red flower within, my heart turned to stone. I passed the slender bottle back to Omine, made a point of not looking at anything except the Serpentine Throne. That accursed chair that represented a duty I hadn't wanted. But now it represented the ability to rain down justice on someone who had wronged my family twice over and taken my best friend's life. Mayhap this person had intended to poison me, and as such became a traitor to the throne, to my family, to the storm sorcerers, and to Nantai herself. When I reached the steps, I climbed slowly, and at the top I turned with my chin held high and sat. A pair of guards appeared in the doorway through which I'd just entered. I projected my voice. "One of you, go to Senti Summergala and bring him here to me. Omine Evangale has something for him to examine. Tell him the empress believes it'll be Primlock." After they disappeared, I finally settled my gaze on the gray form cowered before me. He lifted his eyes, and within them, I took note of a white speck within his right pupil. The eyes looked youthful, but peered back from within an aged face. If this man were to stand, he would stoop. In truth, his back was bent where he knelt upon the floor. My voice sounded hollow, distant, and cold as I spoke. "You wished me well when I offered you a piece of my mother. Yet you hold ill will against me for some reason I do not follow." He remained silent, but a smile spread on his face. "Do you have nothing to say for your actions?" Anger began to filter into my words.
"I do not,"
he answered, a defiant note within the once again hale voice, the sound so very at odds with the aged man. "But you poisoned Jacqueline Feathergala." Silence. "And Corwine Donsgala." Nothing. I leaned forward. "If you choose not to answer these charges, I will take that as an answer of affirmation. Now, I will ask once more." Guards trickled into the room at the back and lined the walls. I disregarded them. "Did you poison my attendant and my aunt's consort?" The gray-dressed man, both old and young at the same time, with the fleck in his right eye, pressed his lips together and remained mute. Omine Evangale shook his head, then stopped, his cheeks still blubbering for a second following.
"Should we have him sent to the cells beneath the keep to await his death?"
No matter that he likely poisoned two people I loved dearly, the thought of asking someone else to slaughter him soured my stomach. "No." I paused for long enough that those who'd entered the room began to murmur. I raised both hands. "Let's put him in the cell within the highest spire. The cold will be upon us soon, and nature can take her course upon this traitor. I stood and walked slowly to the door of the throne room, between the guards, and turned toward my rooms. After descending the stairs, I called a gust of wind to see me quickly to my chambers. Within, I locked the door and went to my dresser. Grabbing onto the bowl sitting on top with shaky hands, I emptied the few contents of my stomach over and over again, until I felt weak, but purged of having sentenced someone to a slow death. Again, the truth rang in my ears as to how I wasn't fit to be an empress. I hadn't the stomach for such things.